primarily is effective study habits. And so we're going to look at a variety of different things. But also one of the things I want to do while we're doing this is also want to ask questions and find out what you're doing as well. Because the list that I have and things that you can do doesn't necessarily mean that it's a complete list. Every student is different in how they approach studying, so I definitely want to ask you questions, see what you're doing. Also, as we go through some of this, I'm going to ask you whether or not you're doing any of this currently. And so I definitely want to have some feedback. What I'd like to do, and come on in, Trent, what I'd like to do is ask first, what are some of the things that are you doing right now, to help you study? And so for Kyle, what are some of the things that you are currently doing that are helping you this semester so far?
It's pretty simple for me. Coffee, first thing.
Okay, coffee.
I play kind of a piano background in my earphones, and just read, pretty much it.
Okay, so you like a little bit of music, to kind of go with that.
Very tranquil though, very,
So like for example, some students have to have, everything has to be really quiet when they study. Nice quiet place. Some have to have some type of background music or something going on. I'm like that myself. Other examples of things that you are doing currently this semester that's helping you.
Staying organized.
Okay, staying organized, which we'll definitely talk about today. What else?
I always should try to use a lamp right over my book because it seems like I focus a little better.
Okay, a little bit more light, right there, kind of focus in on what you're doing there. Okay.
And I also study right before I go to bed because it seems to stick in my head a little better.
Absolutely, that is something I always do, especially for a test the next day. I always study right before I went to bed. It seemed like sometimes I would dream,
exactly.
what I was covering.
Exactly.
And I'd wake up. Now, it can be a little scary at times too, because you'll wake up and you dreamed, all this stuff, but are you right of what you dreamed? And so
it's always
you have
nice
to kind
to
of
dream
worry
about trigonometry, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And so, but yeah, so we're going to look at a variety of different things. It's just a matter of finding a spot, Trenton. That's the hard part. And so, but at any time, if you want to chime in, definitely let me know. So let's look at some of the things that we're going to be looking at today. So general tips for studying effective. So we'll look at some general things that you should be trying to do. Also, we'll talk about procrastination. That tends to be the big one. Why most students tend to not do well in the class. They wait until the last minute, to turn in their assignments, or they forget altogether. And sometimes they'll have to go to the professor, ask if they can turn in late assignments, and then you of course get points deducted, or they don't allow you to turn it in. And so we will definitely spend some time on that. Of course, taking effective notes. One thing that I definitely want to focus in on is the Cornell method of note taking. I gave you an example in one of the handouts. That shows you exactly how you can approach that, the structure of that. So we will spend some time on that, because I think it's a good, effective way to take notes. Now, keep in mind there are so many other different ways that you can take notes. This is just simply one of those. And then, of course, managing stress, because at the end of the day, if you're not managing stress properly, it's going to be hard to study effectively. And how many of us had to deal with some stress this past semester or two? Trying to juggle everything, and so if you are stressed out, it doesn't matter, if you know all these different techniques, to study more efficiently. You're going to have a difficult time, and so we will focus on that area. So, what are some general tips here? So, make studying a part of your daily routine. How many of us can honestly say we study every day? Okay. And how do you approach that? What do you do when you get up?
I keep a running list and I carry all my homework with me. And because I have a music school, so I teach. So sometimes in between the different students, I have 30 minutes off. And so I'll make sure I'm carrying my syllabus so I can make sure that I'm on track with what my reading and stuff like that is. So
it's great. It's great. Others, are we studying like we should every day? Probably. Okay, so I see a shake of head no, and why? What would be the reason behind that? Of why?
I get distracted easily.
Okay, get distracted easily. Okay, and so
I'm not perfect.
and it's not easy. I mean, you've got a lot. If you have other things going on in your life, sometimes it's hard, to do that. And sometimes you just simply don't feel like doing it. I mean, you go to class every day. You've got assignments that you are working on. Sometimes you feel like you just need a day to relax and get away from it. I was the type of person, I generally did study every day, but I would break it up. And we'll definitely talk about breaking up those tasks so you don't feel overwhelmed. So, yeah, you don't want to miss out. I would suggest looking at your book each day. Some people, they buy their textbook, they open it right before class, kind of glance at it, and then they don't open it until the end of the semester. And some never open it again. So, it would be helpful if you actually did open the book every day, or at least look at your notes that you've been taking every day, because it will start to sink in more instead of waiting a day or two before the test and then looking at it, because it's all going to be new then if you're looking at it then. So every day you should be doing at least a little something there. Manage your study time wisely. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by managing your study time wisely? What should you be doing? And I know, Tim, you mentioned something that you did. You're organized. Yes.
Say prioritize.
Definitely prioritize. Have a planner perhaps. Now, not everyone is for the planner. Some people, and I can tell you, I wasn't all elaborate with a planner and had everything detailed like that. I was more the sticky note type person. I jot down like a to-do list of things I need to do, or I at least kept track of my syllabus, because a lot of times they have, your assignments in there when they're due, and so I kind of go off of that. And so there's different ways that you can approach that. How many of us actually probably use a planner or some type of planner? Okay, so most of us. So, and does it work?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have to have that.
If I didn't have it, I wouldn't get anything done.
Yep, absolutely. And it's something that you can always go back and look at. So if you do forget an assignment, you can always go back and look at that, planner, to see. One thing I like to do is when I get my syllabus, I go in there and I put in dates. I like if there's a test or a paper due, jot that down. Now it may change, things change, as the semester's going by, but you can always update it if you need to. And so, but if you don't write it down, my opinion is you won't really remember it then. It's the same thing when you're taking notes. You don't know it unless you're writing it down. Just simply going into, a classroom, the lecture style, listening to it, in my opinion, is not enough. You gotta write it down. Same thing with if you want to be organized, you gotta start writing that stuff down there. And so, also, does your instructors help you, or remind you of things that you need to be doing?
More or less.
Okay, like for example, my UE class, one thing I do is I obviously have it in the syllabus, but a lot of times I will post when things are due on Blackboard as well. Let them know, hey, coming up this week, we have this assignment due on Friday or something, in that regards, kind of give them a heads up. And so, so your instructor can help you, but don't rely on them solely, because at the end of the day, we have to be responsible for it. It's nice if they kind of help guide us a little bit, but if we rely on that solely, chances are we're going to miss an assignment eventually. And so you probably don't want to do that. Also, collaborate with others. And what do we mean by that? Study groups.
I can't do it.
And some people are great at it, some people are
I
not
don't think I
at it.
could do it either.
And so let's look at the pros of it first, and then we'll look at the cons. So what are some of the pros of having a study group?
Multiple people looking at the same subject, you get different views of what they think.
Absolutely. Because sometimes people see it differently, and it's good to get their, their viewpoint.
Your brain works by reinforcing when you talk about it. When you speak, it actually physically sends a path connection. And so every time you talk with somebody else about that subject or that particular question, it actually imprints.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
It's great.
And how many times that you've been on when you're taking a test and you have gone back and think about some of the conversations that you've had with others about that material?
It becomes real.
Yeah,
It becomes real.
absolutely. And now, what are some of the cons of the group work, or cons?
Getting off subject.
Getting off subject, that's definitely one of them.
I like to talk too much.
Scheduling.
It's more time, more or less teaching others about what they're missing than really my own
Yes.
personal goals, which
Yeah.
is fine sometimes, but
So, like, one of the problems that I had when I was in class is that we had kind of what we call, the free riders. The ones that came there who, never studied hardly, didn't take notes, but they wanted to be in that study group, a day or two before, so they could steal that information, basically, so they could try to do well on the test.
One of the things about teaching, though, and just to kind of help you think about it, that's the number one way to retain a memory. Teaching music, that's the way to become a good musician, is to start teaching, because you actually retain more of what you have to teach.
Right.
And if you don't know it, you're going to find out because you're actually teaching it. So it makes a huge difference on how it's the highest rating for how to remember something.
And one thing to look at is it could be more the patience level of it as well.
That's usually.
You know, do you have the patience to sit there and try to teach others when you feel like maybe they're not contributing like they should?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
You know?
I taught children martial arts, like little kids, and then it helped me with better with my basics. So he's right, like exactly right.
So study groups are not for everyone. You have to find what works for you. I personally liked it to a degree. You know, really I had to make sure that I was comfortable with the people I had in my group. You know, there were certain people I didn't want in my group. Yeah, I felt like they didn't contribute. They were just there to take information and not actually contribute or give anything. And so I had a pretty small, you know, study group most of the time. Normally it was me and maybe one or two others, if that. And so it was pretty small.
The hardest thing about study groups is we're all so busy that it's hard to say, okay, we're going to meet here or do something there. So last semester was kind of easy for one of my classes because one of our classes let out early, so we had about 30 minutes wait time before world music was what it was. So we just kind of gathered up in the hallway and we just all sat there and talked. So that was pretty easy. That made it easy. It's hard when you got to try to get everybody together.
Yeah.
I live 45 minutes from here, so it'd be hard for me.
Yeah, it'd definitely be difficult. I mean, anytime you're commuting, you know, work schedules, I mean, you name it, it's difficult. And so, I mean, I can tell you, I ended up doing a lot of study that tended to be on a Saturday, you know, or even a Sunday in the afternoon or something, you know. But ask yourself this: the ones that are willing to meet you on a Saturday or Sunday, they're probably going to be a little bit more dedicated compared to, you know, the people that you know are there just to kind of get the information. And so you find eventually in time you find that group. Now I would say it's probably easier with a study group once you get into more of your junior and senior level courses, because you're probably going to be taking the same type of courses and you're going to have them for multiple classes. So it's going to get a little bit easier. And how many of us have probably encountered that more? Where, because I know, Brandy, you're taking a lot of science classes, and so so do you find that easier, you know, in those junior
Sometimes,
classes?
I mean, it's easy. We normally have the same schedule. So there's, I want to say you're in my classes, aren't you?
No idea.
Well, hopefully,
What classes are you taking?
you know, you will be study partners one day,
Yeah, I guess so.
potentially. So, okay, and so yeah, so study groups comes down to you. At the end of the day, I can tell you all this stuff, but you have to find what works for you. This is just one method that you can try, and if you don't like it, you don't have to do it. You know, so I mean, and every class is different. There are some classes, maybe, you know, having a study group is more important than other classes. You know, for me, math was one of those where I needed all the help I could get. You know, so it was always nice to see other people working problems also, because one thing that you'll find out is people work problems differently. And so maybe they have a method how they do it that's a lot easier. You know, and I can't tell you how much I've learned from others when it came to, you know, to math, you know, especially. So other things, you know, be alert, you know, for external distractions. So you need to find a good place where you can actually study. And what are some good places? Remember, everyone's different, so what works for you?
I like the library.
Library, Trenton?
The testing room, the Student Success Center.
Okay, and of course, you know, they have computers there, they have the internet there, and you know, they obviously have tutors in there as well, so absolutely good place, and it's generally quiet. Other places?
Library.
Library, okay. How many study well at home?
Me.
Okay, so we know home works for you, and why does it work for you at home?
Because normally everybody in my house goes to bed probably around 8:30.
Okay,
So I have until whenever I decide to go to bed. That's quiet.
okay, that's good.
I work 6 days a week, so.
Now, Kyle, I know you said home doesn't work, and why doesn't it work?
Young children.
Okay, so definitely more distractions, because obviously kids, you know, your kids are going to want your time.
My daughter wants to be in my lap all the time. I'm on the desktop doing my thing. Daddy, don't sit in your lap. Go play with your mom. No. So I'm stuck with her.
So she's going to tell you, you know, you're going to spend time with me.
Yeah.
So,
She's got me a lot.
okay. So Cora, what about you?
I do like staying at home because I have my own room in the second
Okay.
floor.
Mhm.
So they're downstairs playing, doing their own stuff in my room.
Okay. And so I like studying at home, but remember, you know, I didn't have kids at all when I was in college, so it made it a lot easier for me. You know, my wife was always pretty understanding. I mean, she knew that I was crazy when it came to studying. You know, I was dedicated. You know, I studied a lot. You know, when I was you know, in school. So, and that's also part of the thing is that whenever you do study, you do need to have a supportive system there in place. You know, because let's say if you study at home, can the wife watch the kids while you study, or vice versa? And so it does help to actually have an environment where you have that support around you as well. Because if you don't have the support, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get anything done. And it's the same thing if you went to the library if you didn't have that support. Because then what would happen? They would say, "Well, you're always at the library. You're never home. I never see you." And so the support system, I think, is absolutely key. I can't tell you how many students who end up having to drop out. It relates to something in that area. They just didn't have that support. There was a lot of pressure, which creates the stress, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Also, get enough sleep. Why would that be important?
You gotta be alert.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be alert. You don't want to be falling asleep in class.
Affects your memory a lot too.
Absolutely. And you're not going to be performing at your best. Realistically. It doesn't mean that you can't get by. But what happens when you're not getting enough sleep? It may be the difference between an A or B, or a C, and a B, or you name it. So every little thing counts. And so sometimes I didn't always follow that. I always had a sleeping problem. So I was always up till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I just had a difficult time sleeping. I still do. And so sometimes I still have to get up, 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. So it was a little bit more challenging there. And everybody's body is different. Some people function perfectly fine with 4 hours of sleep. Others need 8 to 10 hours of sleep. Only you know your body, and so you have to find what works for you. If you start changing your sleep patterns a little bit more, you'll probably notice a difference. So you have to find what works for you. How much time do you probably say that you sleep on average at night?
10 hours.
Okay. All right.
Nice.
Wow.
That's nice.
Okay. Others?
5 to 6.
5 to 6.
I have to be at work at 4 in the morning, so usually about 4 or 5.
Yeah. Okay.
About 5 to 6.
Okay. Yeah.
How do
So
you guys make it?
quite a few there, 5 to 6. We have a few the luxury of
The
a
first
little
hour
bit
when I
longer.
wake up's horrible.
After that, you don't sleep as long.
Okay. Now, of course, I know Kyle, you mentioned earlier the key to what you have to have when you get up in the morning.
It's coffee.
Coffee.
Well, I'm used to it. I was 17 Army. So
No
I was
caffeine.
used to it early morning.
So caffeine, and we'll talk about how much caffeine a person should have. I have a lot. I have way more than I should have, and so I'm guilty of that. But follow a regular exercise program. Why would that be important at all to being able to study effectively?
Gives you more energy.
Gives you more energy,
Relieve stress.
relieves stress, which we'll talk about that, which will tie back in exercise again.
Gets blood flowing in your brain.
Absolutely. And what else does it do? Does it help you kind of escape, a little bit from the studying for a while? Just get you away from it, where you can go get your mind off things, go work out, and then be able to come back later and tackle that. And so that's what I liked about it the most. It just is a way to get that release. Because how many times have you been studying there and you just get burned out? Your brain is fried. You just need a break, and you need to find something that to get away. Exercise, for me, that was always something that was more enjoyable, and it works out perfect for you because you have to pay for it. Whether you want to go to it or not, you have to pay for it here. $150 a semester, so it's an excuse to go to the gym and get your money's worth there. And so, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about the exercising. And also, get a tutor. How many of us have utilized getting a tutor? Okay, give me examples of why that has helped you. Some people don't want to go to a tutor. There's like a stigma there, which I've never seen.
It's easier to talk to someone your own age than a professor.
Okay, absolutely.
Sometimes the tutors can explain it to you better than a teacher's do because it's
Yes.
one-on-one time.
And, it seems like, sometimes the professor has the more harder way of doing it, more complex. And as students, we are always trying to find the easiest way possible to understand something. And so a lot of times they're going to be able to find that. Like when I used to tutor when I was in college, and so I was always looking for, okay, what is the simplest way to understand this? I'd have a professor give me a lecture for an hour about it. I'm like, I don't remember half of what you said there, But then I could go on my own and just kind of break it down and where I could understand it, and then I would pass that on when I was tutoring to others. And most of the time it worked, for the students that I was tutoring, especially math. I was always trying to find the easiest way to break that down. And I can tell you with math problems, there are 3 or 4 different ways to work a math problem, and so what one is the easier. And I would tell you, some professors were picking you had to do it their way, which would make it even harder. But others are open as long as you work out your problems and show every step. So other examples of that, of tutoring. Do you go to tutoring on a regular basis, or do you just kind of do the pop in whenever you need it, or do you try to get in the schedule of it?
I schedule.
That's
Okay, so you get that schedule, you meet with that tutor every week. Because, some people will say, well, I don't need a tutor every single week because there's some things I know, and so I don't really want to waste their time. But ask yourself, is it really wasting their time going every week? Because what is it doing? It goes back to what we talked about earlier. You're talking. You're talking out loud to someone else. In a way, it's almost like a study group, kind of in a way, but more that one-on-one. But you're talking about it. And even though you may understand what you're covering that week, you're still talking about it, especially math, because there's going to be times where you hit that roadblock in that semester. And so the more you talk about it and you're working on it in the beginning, probably the better scores you can get in the beginning. You build that little cushion there. Because a lot of times at the end, what are professors doing? Cramming, trying to get everything covered towards the end. So you may struggle with some of that material since you're going faster. So if you build up those points early on, you have that little buffer there at the end in case you make that mistake.
One of the things I find with a tutor is that you can actually talk about your weaknesses.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
in a study group you don't want to go there.
And does it reinforce sometimes or makes you feel more comfortable when you do that? Because a lot of times they'll say, you know what, I struggled, with the same type of thing. You're not alone, type deal. So you know that you're not the only one that is struggling in that particular area. And then they tell you what they have done to try to overcome that as well. So now where can we go for tutoring? Obviously, the Student Success Center there. How do we go about actually getting tutor services? Now, most of you have probably got tutor services with us, but how do you go about doing that? Talk to Greg. Talk to Greg. Have it, you fill out that form, what class you need help in, and then he'll actually work and try to get it set up where he can work with your schedule and kind of coordinate schedules with you, the tutor.
I got a tutor with him last week, and it took him about 45 minutes to get my time set up.
Yeah.
I already had the email right after.
Pretty easy to do. Now, I will say a lot depends on what class you need help in. There are some that are a little bit more difficult. But there's also, in addition, let's say we can't find a tutor immediately. Let's say for a language class, like Spanish. What can you do then? What's that? Yeah, go to the language department because they also have tutors there, in their labs. So you can go to departments. Okay, well that's good. Yeah, so always know that there are so many different resources out there on campus. Obviously you're in Project Stay, we have our own resources as well, but there's others also. And so, like, I know for the tutoring wise, we could only offer basically 1 hour per week per class, but it doesn't mean that you can't continue to go in and do, the drop-ins or pop-ins, you might say, in the tutor lab, to get additional help. Or go over to other labs on campus, let's say the language, lab over there, and get help as well. So there's so many different ways that you can get those services. So don't feel like you're limited just to that 1 hour. You are limited in that one-on-one capacity, but it doesn't mean that you can't go in there and continue to get help. And a lot of times you still might get that one-on-one because it may not be that busy, in there. So always, keep that in mind. So some of the places where you can go, Student Success Center, the ACTS, office has various services as well. Obviously your instructors or professors, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to my professor and asked for clarity on maybe a certain, essay paper I'm writing, or, sometimes I'd have them look over my paper. They'd let me do kind of like a rough draft, and then just let me know if I'm on the right course, or if I had any structural issues with my paper, because especially in graduate school, you write 20, 25-page papers, and so, structure is really important. Maybe it's dealing with citations. You're not sure if you're doing it right. So sometimes your professor will just kind of look it over, at least kind of give you, an idea if you're on the right track. And so always go to your professor. If you need a little clarity, obviously Project Stay, and of course the group. Getting in, your study groups if it works for you. If it doesn't, then obviously find another way. So other stuff. Procrastination. How many of us are guilty of procrastinating? Mark, give us an example of your procrastination, because I remember you telling me just the other day about a paper.
Well, I had 2 papers due for graduate school on Tuesday, another one due Wednesday morning, and then my online course, a bunch due by Sunday evening. My plan was to kind of work through it out the weekend, and I ended up not touching it probably till I was watching movies and stuff like that. So I don't think I started till Sunday evening about 7 or 8.
Okay.
And
Now
then-
keep in mind, he's in graduate school,
So it pushed me to, I didn't go to bed really Sunday evening, and then didn't go to bed Monday night much, and then didn't go much to bed Tuesday evening. So yesterday I got home and went to bed, didn't wake up till some more.
Okay.
So everything was it. But that's my biggest problem is I always say stuff like, I'll get it, I can get it on Saturday I'll start on Saturday, and then Saturday comes around, and I got my son, and so he ends up wanting to do stuff, and then I end up, Seahawks are in the Super Bowl, so I'm a big Seattle fan, so I'm reading ESPN, and somehow the day just goes by.
Okay. And how would you say your stress level was, Sunday into Monday?
My stress level goes up, but the one thing that, kind of like my, kryptonite to procrastination is when I lock in, I lock in. And so it's kind of my way of dealing with procrastination. So when I finally lock in, my stress level goes down, because then it just starts to,
It starts to flow.
yeah, it starts to flow. I don't know why that
Under
is.
pressure.
And the sad thing is I always say that, man, then I get my papers back and I get a great grade, so it enables, it's trying to break out of the procrastination. Like, it'd be nice to get a bad paper where it's like, you just did horrible on this and say, oh my God, just because I procrastinated. But then I get my paper back and it's a pretty good grade, and I'm like, okay, I can do this again,
Okay.
So it's kind of one of those things.
Okay. It's become a bad habit now, but
Yeah.
you're not being, punished for it, so you haven't got caught, we'll say. It's like you committed the crime, but you didn't get caught, so it's okay to do it again.
It's done it forever. It's like, it's locked in. Like, I'm 46, so the reality of it is I on the bigger stuff, on the stuff that I'm not very good at, because graduate school's been kind of tough because, it's a mental health background, social work, but I've been in mental health my entire life, so I can always fall back on experiences when I'm writing my papers, so I get a little lazy, so, but I have to beat it.
Other examples of procrastination. Reading. Don't want to have to do all the reading assignments. Graduate school is by far the worst because, like one class you may have 5 textbooks and then you have journal readings that you have to do on top of that. It's crazy. Okay.
I found that when I'm on a much busier schedule, I don't procrastinate as much because I know I don't have any time anywhere else.
Okay.
And if I have a lot of free time, I'll procrastinate because I know, oh, I can do that 2 more days. So,
Trenton, do we procrastinate at all?
Oh, like him, I have a long history of procrastination.
And have you paid the price for it at all at times, or not?
It depends.
Okay. Okay. Because I look at it this way. Procrastination. There are going to be plenty of times where you can get away with it. You'll get by. You'll make a good grade, and you'll think, all right, I'll change next time. And then of course it doesn't happen. But there are other times where you do procrastinate, and it could be the difference between an A or a B, or a C or a B, or whatever. And so, and that has happened, to me a couple of times where I thought, man, I could have spent a little bit more time on that one, and I could have got it higher. Even if it was just a couple points higher, it could have been. And so I mean, it does add up in the end. It could be the difference between whether or not you make an 88 in that class, or you make an A. And I've had a few classes, especially graduate school, where I had 88, and it just drove me insane because I thought, man, if I just done a little bit more there on this one assignment, it could have been the difference. And so I mean, procrastination does affect a lot of students, and it doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. I mean, you're going to make mistakes at times. The idea is to just be aware of it and constantly try to improve on it. I mean, if you're at least attempting to try, that's the first step. If you just basically look at it, I don't care, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do, then obviously you can't fix it then because you don't want to fix it. So you have to at least be trying.
Does Southern have a lot of online courses? Because that was the other area for procrastination.
Yes. A lot of
I have
online classes.
This semester.
I do much better in a classroom, which a lot of my bachelor's was in. I did it online because being military, I just went everywhere, so I didn't want to change schools. But online was really tough, you know, just because like there's no one holding you accountable except for that little deadline on Sunday or
Sunday
Monday.
at 11.
And I think that's a
Yeah,
good
exactly.
point, you know, I mean, you have to know your strengths and your weaknesses. Some people thrive when it comes to online classes. They have that dedication, they can knock it out, they don't need any help whatsoever with that.
I like wait till like the day before everything's due, and then I lose sleep, and I like to sleep, so.
Yeah, but you bank sleep, you get 10 hours a day.
Yeah, you're bank, yeah, you've got
But if I like
reserves.
wait, I only get like 7, and then I'm tired.
I pray for
7 hours is me sleeping in.
Yeah.
I'm
So
like
yeah,
gone,
I was never an
so-
online person, but it wasn't really to do with procrastination. It was more I felt like I wasn't getting what I needed. You know, I love that instruction time. It was really where you could ask questions. You know, when they were lecturing, you get that immediate feedback. You know, through online, I mean, if you don't know something, you might be able to shoot them an email, but some professors don't want you emailing them a whole bunch. So, and who knows how long it takes for you to get that email back.
And see, that's the deal with one of mine is like we were like, hey, where's this quiz you're talking about? We can't find it. Well, it's like 2 days later and the answer's this. And we're just like sitting there waiting.
So if you have a history of procrastination, online classes might not be the best thing. You know, it doesn't mean that you don't, don't take any, but at least reduce it.
Sometimes you have to.
Yeah, so, yeah, you don't have a
Just have
choice.
to, yeah.
But you can reduce some of that where you don't set yourself up for potential failure, you know, down the road there. So what are some strategies that we can overcome, things that we can do? Obviously, be aware of the possible consequences. I mean, professors will actually give you a bad grade if you don't turn in your assignments or incomplete assignments. You know, most of them are not going to say, well, you know, I feel sorry for you, so I'm going to give you, some extra points. Now, when I used to teach government history, I kind of had a little joke with a lot of my students because we had a lot of essay writing, when it came to on the test. And so sometimes I get like one sentence, when it was supposed to be a page. And so they would just write something, anything. And I told them, as long as you write something, a word on there, I will give you 1 pity point. So we did have a pity point, that we gave out. But most professors are probably not going to do that. So, you can't rely on them to just say, you know what, I know that you had it tough, you worked 50 hours a week. And I would have some students who would actually write that on their test. They'd write me a full, essay about how they don't have time to study and I should give them a break. And so, yes, they would do this. They're like, I know I should have been studying, I just don't have time. And they just write me this explanation of why they couldn't write the material down on the essay. And so, I felt bad for them. I want them to do well, but what did I do? I gave them 1 pity point, So you do not have to be aware of the consequences. At the end of the day, you sign up for it, either do it or don't, basically. Also, create a to-do list. I think that helps. And we have various ways that we do that. I like to have sticky notes and I jot down things that I need to try to accomplish that day. And then at the end of the day, I kind of look and see if I was able to do that. Because throughout the day, I try to do a check mark, check it off, my list. It works for me, doesn't necessarily work for everyone. Of course, break big jobs into smaller steps. How many of us probably do that more often?
That saves me.
Absolutely. And why does it save you?
Well, because even big papers, like for me, writing big papers, like the 20-page
Yeah.
papers, is I always go to the reflection spots where I can reflect because it's something I can generate pretty quickly, or ethics spots where I know my ethics pretty well, so I can bring it all back. And then when I get into the stuff that are more difficult, I'm already in the paper for now an hour and a half, 2 hours, so it becomes very easy for me to kind of go ahead and finish the task.
Yeah, it's
Or if I
great for graduate school when you're doing those. You have to break it down into small steps. But how can we do that for, let's say, a Comp 1 or a Comp 2 class? Maybe you decide to just work on 1 paragraph a day.
Okay.
Maybe it's your introduction that day. Just have a good, solid, introduction, or maybe you work on your thesis statement.
Just get it started.
Yeah, just getting it started and just breaking it down into smaller pieces. So for some, we'll say, well, you have a 3-page paper due, whenever, and you're thinking, oh my God, it's 3 pages long. I used to actually think that was long, but when I first started. And so I thought, man, that's 3 pages. This is going to take forever. And then once you get to graduate school and you're doing 20 and 25-page papers and you're thinking, there's no way I can do this, eventually you're knocking them out. And so, 3 pages was a lot. Now, it's not. Same thing with 20 for me. It's not as big deal anymore. But what you can do is just break it down. A paragraph a day, a couple sentences a day. Depending on how your time span. But what are some other examples, that you can do about breaking things, big things into smaller things?
I use a 2-minute rule.
Okay, 2-minute rule, explain.
If you can do something in 2 minutes, do it, and then it's out of the way.
Yeah.
So if it's, look at your syllabus and make sure you gotta do it, or it's even simple things like empty the dishwasher,
Yeah.
you know, just, I mean, things that just, they're completely out of the way.
Yeah.
And then you don't have, then you don't walk in, you got a whole full sink full of dishes, or you got your laundry that has to be done, or you don't have a list to work off of. If it only takes you 2 minutes to make a list, just make it. That way,
Yeah.
at least you got it done. Because if you keep waiting until, oh, I'll sit down and make that list when I finally got time, you'll never make the list.
Yeah, and you can prioritize. You know, maybe there are some assignments due before other ones. So you work on that, you know, in the beginning, then you work on the other one after you take a break. One thing I used to do all the time is I would study one subject, take a break, go do whatever. For some reason, my wife and I, we loved going to Walmart back in the day, you know, because we only lived like a mile away at the time, and so I'd study for a while, take a break, we'd go to Walmart. I was cheap, so I didn't want to pay for magazines, but I'd go there and I'd just read some of the magazines that they had for a while. And then I'd go back home and I'd study, but I would switch to a different topic then. So I'm constantly going back and forth on various, subjects. Now, for some people, they don't like that. They just want to focus on that one, get it done, and move on to the next. For me, I didn't mind that. I liked switching and going back and forth, because I didn't get too burned out in one area. And so you have to find what works for you when it comes to that. Some other things, obviously, you should reward yourself. If you do something, you accomplish something, you should give yourself some type of reward. Maybe it's watching your favorite show or renting a movie or something. The idea is just to make sure you don't reward yourself too much. You're doing more reward than you are, the task. And so what do we do sometimes when we do reward ourselves? Maybe we don't even really think we're rewarding ourselves, but we are in a way. What are some of the things that we do after we've done something? What are some things?
I go hang out at the coffee shop.
Coffee shop? Okay. And why do you like doing
I just meet friends and stuff, and just a place to relax.
Yeah, get away from things.
Yeah.
Okay, what else? What are some other examples?
I actually read a book that I want to read.
Okay, you actually get to read a book you want to. I remember
Yeah.
in college, I read all, you're reading all the assignments that they give you. I never got to read for pleasure because I always felt guilty. I thought, well, I could be reading, ahead in another class.